Michael was a man who had everything money could buy. As a CEO of one of the most powerful corporations in the country, he wore the finest suits, drove the most expensive cars, and stayed in the most luxurious hotels. People admired his success, his sharp mind and his cold precision. But deep down, Michael had little time for emotion, patience, or people who he thought were beneath him. That afternoon, the sun was warm and the roads were quiet. Michael was driving his brand new Rolls-Royce Phantom, enjoying the silence, the leather interior, and the gentle hum of the powerful engine. He had a major meeting scheduled in the next city, a meeting that could push his company's stock higher than ever. Everything was going smoothly, just like it always did for him. But then, something strange happened. The engine made a soft, choking sound. Michael frowned, glancing at the dashboard. A warning light blinked, then the car shuddered slightly and rolled to a slow stop on the side of the road. He tried to restart it, but the engine didn't respond. Before we jump back in, tell me, where are you watching this video from below? And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow's episode is extra special. For a man like him, used to total control, this was more than frustrating. It was insulting. He got out of the car, opened the hood, and stared at the engine. It looked like any other high-tech machine, complicated and spotless. He tapped a few parts, checked the oil, but he had no idea what was wrong. He made a call to the company hotline, but the nearest mechanic was over 2 hours away. Michael let out a sharp sigh, rubbing his forehead. He wasn't used to waiting. He wasn't used to being stuck. Then from down the dusty road, a small voice called out, "Everything okay, mister?" Michael turned his head and saw a young girl, probably no older than 10 or 11. She wore a simple blue coverall with rolled-up sleeves, a little greasy, in spots. She had a toolbox in one hand and a can of soda in the other. Her boots were too big for her small feet, and her dark hair was tied back in a ponytail. She looked like someone from a different world, one with less money and far fewer worries. Michael stared at her in disbelief. "You lost or something?" he asked, not bothering to hide the irritation in his voice. She walked closer, ignoring his tone. "Nope, I live just over there, down that path. Saw your car stop. Thought you might need a hand." He gave a bitter chuckle. "You think you can fix a Rolls-Royce?" She smiled. "Not saying I can, but I've fixed worse." Michael crossed his arms. "This isn't a toy. It's a $500,000 car. It's got a V12 engine, computerized systems." The girl nodded. "It's probably the idle control valve. These engines sometimes stall if the valve gets clogged. My dad's worked on a few." Michael raised an eyebrow. "And what does your dad do? Collect old engines in your backyard?" She nodded. "Something like that. He's a mechanic. Taught me everything I know. I help him after school." Michael looked down at her, unsure whether to laugh or be offended. Then his eyes caught something, a ring on her right hand. It was silver, a little oversized, with a small star and wings on the face. It wasn't flashy like his own jewelry, but it looked official, something military, something with weight. "What's that ring?" he asked suddenly. The girl looked at it, then rubbed it gently with her thumb. "It was my brother's," she said softly. "He passed it on to me before he left for his last deployment." Michael's tone shifted slightly. "Military?" She nodded again. "Air Force. He was only 23. Michael didn't say anything for a moment. He looked back at the car, then at the girl again. His pride told him to say no, but something in the quiet confidence of her voice told him otherwise. "Fine," he muttered. "Do what you want. I'm not going anywhere anyway." She smiled brightly and walked over. With careful movements, she opened the toolbox, pulled out a small flashlight, a few tools, and climbed up to peer into the engine. Her small hands moved with purpose. She asked him to start the engine, then stop it. She checked a few connections. After about 5 minutes, she nodded to herself. Yup, just what I thought. She pulled out the idle control valve, wiped it clean, and used a tiny wire brush to remove the buildup. Then she cleaned the throttle body, tightened a few bolts, and put everything back. Her face was serious, her eyes focused. Michael stood back, watching her silently. He was still annoyed, still frustrated, but now also a little curious. He couldn't understand how a little girl from nowhere could know so much about something most trained mechanics struggled with. And that ring. Something about it kept drawing his eyes back. When she finished, she closed the hood gently and wiped her hands on a rag. "Try it now," she said. Michael hesitated, then opened the driver's door. He turned the key. The engine started instantly, smoother than before. It purred like new. He blinked, then looked over at her in disbelief. "How? Did you really? Just fix that?" She shrugged. "Wasn't too hard." Michael stepped out of the car and walked toward her. "That ring, your brother gave it to you?" She nodded again. "He used to say it reminded him to stay brave. He told me to wear it when I fix engines. So I remember that it's not just about fixing stuff. It's about fixing what people depend on." Michael stood there for a moment, unsure what to say. He had spent his whole life chasing success, looking down on people who didn't wear suits or drive luxury cars. Yet here, a girl with dirt on her hands and a military ring on her finger had saved his day, without expecting anything in return. He pulled out his wallet, but she quickly raised a hand. "I don't need money," she said. Michael was surprised. "Then what do you want?" She smiled and pointed to the sky. "Just promise me when you look up, you think of people who fix things behind the scenes, people who fight for others, like my brother." For the first time in years, Michael had no answer. He slowly nodded. She turned and started to walk away, back toward the path where she came from. Michael stood there, engine running, watching her fade into the distance. In his hand, he held the card she had handed him, a small scrap of paper with a phone number and a name, Ellie Torres, junior mechanic. He slipped it into his jacket pocket, started the car, and drove away slowly. But something in him had shifted, something real, and he knew he'd never forget the little girl with the big heart. And the ring that reminded him of bravery he hadn't known still existed in the world. Michael drove away slowly, the hum of the engine smooth and quiet again, but inside his thoughts were loud. He replayed every moment of what had just happened. The image of that little girl, Ellie, working on his engine with focused hands, and confident eyes stuck in his mind, and that ring, that simple military ring with the star and wings, worn proudly by someone so young, felt more meaningful than all the gold watches and fancy pens he owned. Back in the city, his world returned to noise and speed. Meetings, phone calls, deadlines. The business world didn't wait for emotions. But Michael wasn't the same man he was before his car had broken down. Something about that brief moment on the country road had dug deep into his mind. He found himself staring at the note Ellie had given him, just her name and a phone number. He kept it in his wallet, checked it from time to time. He told himself it was nothing, just a random act of kindness from a curious, unusually skilled girl. But somehow it didn't feel random. Days passed, then a week. Then late one night, as Michael sat alone in his high-rise office, the city lights glowing outside, he finally picked up his phone and dialed the number. It rang once, twice, then someone answered, a warm, slightly tired voice. It wasn't Ellie. "Hello?" Hi," Michael said, not sure how to start. "I'm looking for Ellie Torres." "Oh," the voice said, "she's asleep right now. May I ask who's calling?" Michael paused. "My name is Michael Rhodes. She helped me with my car a few days ago. I just wanted to thank her." The woman on the phone let out a soft laugh. "That sounds like her. She's always fixing something. I'm her mother." Michael hesitated. She mentioned her father and her brother. Is he—" The woman's tone changed slightly. "Her brother Jesse served in the Air Force. He passed away last year. Training accident overseas." Michael lowered his head. "I'm so sorry." "She wears his ring everywhere," the woman continued. "Keeps her strong. She talks about him all the time, like he's still right beside her." There was silence between them for a moment. Then Michael spoke. "Your daughter. She's brilliant. She fixed a $500,000 car in 10 minutes. I don't think I've ever seen anyone so focused, so calm, and so young. She's always been that way," her mother said softly. "Jesse inspired her. He wanted to teach her everything before he left. He told her she was the future." Michael's grip tightened around the phone. "Would you mind if I came by sometime?" he asked, "to thank her properly." Her mother sounded surprised, but not unhappy. "Of course. She'd like that." 3 days later, Michael made the drive out again. This time, he wasn't in his Rolls-Royce. He came in a more modest vehicle, a black pickup he barely used, hoping it would make him seem less out of place. Ellie's house was small, cozy, with flower pots lining the porch and tools scattered near the garage. Michael stepped out and looked around. It wasn't the kind of place he'd ever expected to visit, but something about it felt more real than all the luxury spaces he spent his life in. The front door opened and Ellie came running out. "You came back," she grinned. Michael smiled. "Told you I would." Her mother followed, wiping her hands on a towel. "Mr. Rhodes, right?" "Just Michael," he said, shaking her hand. "Thank you for letting me visit." Ellie tugged at his sleeve. "Want to see my latest project?" He chuckled. "Sure." She led him to the garage, where an old rusted motorcycle sat half disassembled. "I'm trying to get this running before school starts," she said proudly. "It's not much, but I want to ride it around town." Michael examined the parts. "Looks like a challenge." She shrugged. "That's the fun part." They spent the next hour talking about engines, tools, machines. Ellie's knowledge was beyond impressive. She spoke like someone twice her age. Michael listened, asked questions, even offered a few suggestions, though he quickly realized she knew more about some things than he did. After a while, he sat down and looked at her seriously. "Ellie, I want to offer you something." She raised her eyebrows. "I run a company, a big one. We have an internship program, usually for college students. But I want to make an exception. Would you be interested in visiting our tech division, learning from our engineers?" Ellie's eyes lit up, but then she looked uncertain. "I'm only 11, Michael smiled. "I know, but talent doesn't follow age. And your brother was right. You are the future. I think he'd be proud to see you learning more." She looked at her mom, who nodded softly, a proud smile on her face. "I'd love that," Ellie said finally. That summer, Ellie visited Michael's company several times. She walked through glass halls and high-tech labs. She met engineers who were shocked to meet someone her age who could explain torque ratios better than some of their interns. She asked questions, took notes, and always wore her brother's ring. Michael became more than just the CEO. He became a mentor. He arranged scholarships, introduced her to inventors, and watched as this young girl continued to grow not just in skill, but in heart. One day, while walking through the engineering lab, Ellie turned to Michael. "You know," she said, "I used to think fixing engines was all I'd ever want to do, but now I want to build things that help people, big things." Michael smiled. "Then that's exactly what you'll do." She held up her hand, showing him the ring again. "He told me to be brave," she said. "I think I finally understand what that means." Michael looked at her, then out the window toward the city skyline. "You've already changed more than you know," he said softly, and he meant it, because Ellie wasn't just a little girl who fixed a car. She was a spark, a reminder of purpose, of humility, and of the quiet strength that lives in those the world often overlooks. And from that day on, every time Michael sat behind the wheel of his car, he didn't think about power or money. He thought about a girl with dirt on her hands and a ring on her finger, and how she fixed more than just his engine that day. Months passed. Ellie's visits to Michael's company became more frequent. She would spend weekends and holidays in the tech labs, surrounded by machines, screens, and people twice or even 3 times her age. But no one treated her like a child anymore. The engineers, coders, and designers began to see her as one of their own, not because of her age, but because of her ideas. She asked questions others didn't think to ask. She noticed things in blueprints that older minds missed. Her mind worked like a puzzle solver's, quietly, patiently, and always with purpose. Michael watched all of this from the corner of boardrooms and workshops. It amazed him. He had once thought of success as something you wore. A sharp suit, a big office, a luxury car. But Ellie reminded him that real greatness didn't shout. It just worked step by step, until something impossible was fixed. One day, he called Ellie into his office, a room with tall windows and a view of the entire skyline. She walked in with her backpack over one shoulder, her hands still a little greasy from working in the prototype lab. "You wanted to see me?" she asked. Michael nodded, smiling. "I've been thinking," he said, "about how many things you've helped improve since you started coming here. You've brought fresh ideas. You've solved problems we thought were unsolvable. You've inspired my entire team, and you're only 12. She smiled shyly, fidgeting with the military ring on her finger. "I'm just doing what my brother taught me. Fix what you can. Help who you can." Michael stood and walked over to his desk. He handed her a folder. She opened it slowly. Inside was a certificate, an official offer to join a special long-term mentorship program, paid learning, engineering sponsorship, a path into the top universities, if she chose to take it. Ellie's eyes widened. "Is this real?" Michael nodded. "You've earned every word on that page, and more." Her hands shook slightly as she held the paper. "Thank you," she whispered. But just as quickly, a thought crossed her mind. Her smile faded a little. "I want to accept it," she said, "but I need to fix something first." Michael looked at her, puzzled. "Fix what?" She hesitated. "My dad. He's been sick. He doesn't talk about it much. But I know he's in pain. He still works in that tiny garage every day because we need the money." Michael's expression turned serious. "I didn't know." Ellie nodded. "He raised me alone after Mom passed away. He's the reason I know how to use a wrench, the reason Jesse taught me everything. I can't just leave him behind." Michael understood. He saw now that fixing things for Ellie wasn't just about machines. It was about people, family, promises. "Then let me help," Michael said. Ellie looked up, surprised. "You've done enough already." "No," he said, "I haven't. Not until the people who helped you are also taken care of. That's what leadership means. That's what your brother would have wanted." Within days, Michael arranged for one of the best private doctors in the state to visit Ellie's father. Tests were done quietly, reports reviewed. The diagnosis came quickly, a long-ignored spinal condition caused by years of lifting, engines and working in cold, damp conditions. It wasn't fatal, but it was serious. With surgery and rest, he could recover. Michael paid for it all. No press release, no cameras, no social media post. Just action. Ellie's father was hesitant. At first proud, quiet, but when he saw Ellie's hopeful eyes and Michael's respectful tone, he finally nodded. "I only accept because of her," he said. Michael replied, "That's all the reason I need." Weeks later, after her father's surgery, Ellie stood beside his hospital bed. He was asleep, breathing steady, his hands no longer shaking. She reached into her pocket and pulled out her brother's ring. "I think I'm ready now," she whispered. And so her journey began. Michael's mentorship opened doors that were once closed to kids like Ellie. She was invited to speak at a youth innovation conference. She helped design a part for an electric vehicle prototype. And when asked how she learned all this, she always gave the same answer. "My brother taught me to fix things. My dad showed me how to work with my hands. And a man who once broke down on the road showed me how to dream bigger." But not everything was easy. There were people who doubted her, said she was too young, that she was a charity case, that Michael was just using her story to make himself look better. Ellie never replied with anger. Instead, she let her work speak for her. She kept building, kept learning, kept showing up with oil on her fingers and plans in her backpack. One day, during a board meeting, Michael overheard two executives questioning Ellie's presence in the company's innovation program. "She's smart, sure," one of them whispered, "but this isn't a playground. We have rules." Michael stood up, his voice calm but cold. "She's not here because of sympathy. She's here because she's better than half the people you've promoted. And she's 12. Silence. That was the last time anyone questioned Ellie's place in the building. As Ellie turned 13, something inside her began to shift again. She no longer just wanted to fix engines. She wanted to build them. Engines that were cleaner, simpler, affordable. She began working on a prototype, a hybrid motor that used less fuel, ran quieter, and could be repaired using simple tools. It took months, countless failures, sketch after sketch. Then one night, long after most of the staff had gone home, Michael found her asleep on the workbench, surrounded by blueprints. He gently draped a coat over her shoulders, then looked at what she'd built. His eyes widened. This wasn't just clever. It was revolutionary. He stayed up the whole night reviewing it. The next morning, he called his senior engineers. By noon, the team had gathered in the lab. Ellie stood in front of them, a little nervous but confident. "This engine," she explained, "is for people like my dad. Mechanics who can't afford special computers or digital diagnostics. It's simple, strong, and it can be fixed with basic tools. But it still runs clean, it saves fuel, and it doesn't give up." Michael stood beside her. "This is the future," the team agreed. And so the project was approved, not as a side experiment, but as a central innovation for the company's next generation of vehicles. They named it the Jesse Drive, after Ellie's brother. When the press asked Michael why he chose that name, he simply said, "Because some people leave behind more than memories. They leave behind legacies. This engine is one of them." Ellie never stopped working. She never stopped learning. And even as the world began to recognize her, interviews, awards, articles, she never forgot where she came from. She still called her dad every day. She still wore the ring. And every time she met someone new in the workshop, she introduced herself the same way. "Hi, I'm Ellie. I fix things." Because that's what she did. She fixed broken engines, broken companies, broken beliefs. And slowly, without realizing it, she fixed people too. Starting with a CEO who once thought a little girl couldn't possibly know more than he did. Years had passed, the world had changed, and so had Ellie. She was 17 now, taller, wiser. Her hands still carried grease, and the ring on her finger was still there, but now worn smooth from years of wear. The ring had become part of her story. Everyone who knew Ellie Torres knew about the ring. They knew it belonged to her brother Jesse, and that she wore it as a promise to him and to herself. The Jesse Drive engine had changed lives. It had made clean, reliable transport more accessible, especially in rural towns and developing areas. Mechanics everywhere wrote letters to the company thanking Ellie, often calling her the girl with golden hands. Some of them didn't know her name, but they knew her work. Ellie had become a symbol, that not of fame, but of function. She wasn't interested in red carpets or spotlights. She wanted to build things that worked, things that mattered But one morning, everything shifted again. Michael Rhodes, the man who had once been a CEO stuck on a quiet road, the man who had helped Ellie rise, collapsed during a board meeting. A sudden heart attack. Paramedics arrived. Quickly, he was rushed to the hospital, alive but in critical condition. When Ellie got the news, she didn't speak. She just drove straight to the hospital. She sat outside his room for hours, refusing to leave even when doctors told her there was nothing she could do. She didn't cry. She just sat, holding the ring, turning it over and over in her palm. She had fixed a lot of things in her life, but this she couldn't fix. Not with a wrench. Not with a blueprint. Days turned into a week. Michael eventually woke, but he was weak. The doctors told him he needed rest, real rest. His heart had taken too much. Stress, pressure, work. It had finally caught up to him. One evening, as Ellie sat beside him in the hospital room, he looked at her with tired eyes. "I think it's time I stepped away," he whispered. Ellie shook her head. "You can't. You're the reason I—" He reached out and took her hand. "No," he said, "you are the reason I kept going. But now it's your turn. I've built my legacy. Now it's time for you to build yours." "But I'm only 17, she said. Michael smiled faintly. "I was 35 when I thought I knew everything, and then a little girl on a country road showed me I didn't." She stayed silent. He added, "The board's going to ask you something. They're going to ask you to take a role. Not CEO, not yet. But something important. Don't say no, say yes. Lead. Show them what happens when real change starts from the ground, not the top." The next week, Ellie stood in front of the board of directors, a room full of powerful people in suits, all of them older, wealthier, more experienced. But none of them had built an engine that powered thousands of lives. None of them had learned engineering by candlelight, while their dad fixed engines in a cold garage. None of them had helped turn a broken-down Rolls-Royce into a turning point. Ellie listened as the chairman stood. "Miss Torres," he said, "Mr. Rhodes has recommended you to serve as the new head of innovation and social design. You'll lead our community technology division, designing for real-world problems, especially in underprivileged areas. We know you're young, but your record speaks for itself. Do you accept?" The room went quiet. Ellie took a deep breath. She looked down at her ring, then back at the board. "I accept," she said. And so, Ellie Torres became the youngest division head in the company's history, but she didn't change who she was. She still wore boots instead of heels, still preferred the garage over the office, still kept her dad's photo, and Jesse's, on her desk. Her first project was bold. A solar-powered engine that could run water filtration systems in drought-affected villages. Her second, a modular scooter that could be built by teens in school workshops using recycled parts. Every blueprint had her signature. Every launch had her message: build it simple, build it strong, build it so anyone can fix it. And the world listened. One day, she was invited to speak at a global innovation summit. Leaders, inventors, scholars from every country were there. She stood at the podium wearing a simple jacket and jeans. Her ring glinted under the lights. She told the story of a little girl, of a broken car, of a man who gave her a chance, of her brother, who never saw the world she was building but believed in it anyway. She ended her speech with a message. "There are two kinds of people in the world," she said. "Those who wait for someone to fix what's broken, and those who try, even when they don't know how. I never knew how to fix the world. But I started with an engine, and I just kept going." The room erupted in applause, but Ellie didn't stay long after the summit. She didn't like praise, she liked problems. Back home, she started a foundation in Jesse's name, Giving. Scholarships to kids who liked to tinker, who didn't have the best schools or tools, but who had heart. Her foundation helped open mobile workshops, rolling labs that traveled across small towns. teaching young minds how to build, repair, and think. She visited them herself, and every time a young girl walked up to her with a question, shy, uncertain, Ellie knelt down, smiled, and said, "Show me what you're working on." One afternoon, as she returned from one of those workshops, she found her dad waiting on the porch. He was older now, slower, but his eyes still sparkled. "Got something for you," he said. He handed her an old dusty envelope. Inside was a note, folded carefully. It was from Jesse. It had been in a toolbox all these years. He must have written it before his last deployment. Ellie unfolded it with trembling fingers. "If you're reading this, I guess I didn't make it home. I'm sorry for that. But don't stop learning, okay? Keep building. Keep fixing. I know you're going to do things I can't even imagine. You're stronger than you know. I'll always be proud of you. Jesse." Ellie stood still for a long time. Then for the first time in years, she cried. But it wasn't just sadness. It was pride, joy, and a deep, powerful sense of peace. Because Jesse had believed in her. And now the world did too. That night she sat, alone in her garage, the one her father once worked in. The tools were all still there, the smell of oil and metal unchanged. She picked up a wrench, not because something was broken, but because she was building something new. A better world. One bolt, one wire, one spark at a time. 5 years later, Ellie Torres was no longer the little girl people once underestimated. She was 22 now, a young woman known in every corner of the engineering world. Her name was spoken in classrooms, workshops, and boardrooms alike, but she still walked like she did back when she fixed Michael's engine. Steady, quiet, always watching. She had built engines. She had built solutions. Now, the world asked her to help build hope because something was going wrong. Something big. Across the globe, the weather was changing faster than expected. Crops were failing. Storms were stronger. In one small country near the coast, an entire village had been flooded. Families had lost everything. Entire cities were left without clean water, working electricity, or proper shelter. It wasn't a problem one person could fix, but Ellie didn't walk away. Instead, she flew there herself. No press, no cameras, just a backpack full of tools and a notebook full of sketches. When she arrived, the air was heavy with heat and worry. Children sat on rooftops, schools were gone, fields turned to mud. But in the middle of the disaster zone, a young boy, maybe 9 years old, was holding a bent metal fan blade in his hand, trying to turn it into something useful. Ellie watched quietly. Then she knelt beside him. "What are you making?" she asked. The boy looked up, surprised. "A windmill," he said. "To make light." Ellie smiled. "Want some help?" He nodded, and just like that, she started again, the same way she always had, by fixing something small. But her plan was bigger than a windmill. That night, in a tent with nothing but lantern light, Ellie drew a system, a solar-powered water filter that could fit into the back of a truck, a turbine made from recycled car parts, a battery powered by salt water. Simple things, but strong things, the kind of things that didn't require a big factory or fancy tools. Within weeks, she gathered a team, young engineers, teachers, mechanics, and students, people from across the country who wanted to help. She taught them how to build each part, and then those people taught others. In just 2 months, the village had running water. In 3, children were back in school, in buildings powered by sunlight. In 4, farmers had working machines again. The boy who made the windmill, he became her shadow. Learning every part, every wire, every gear, he called her Teacher Ellie. But back home, things weren't still. Michael Rhodes had fully retired. The company had grown, bigger than ever. But some new leaders were more focused on profit than purpose. One executive said in a meeting, "Ellie's doing charity work. That's not our model." Another said, We should be focusing on expansion, not giving away tech for free. Word of this reached Ellie. She didn't get angry. She asked for a meeting. In that boardroom, the same one where she first stood years ago, she faced them again. "I'm not doing charity," she said. "I'm investing in the future. If we only build for the rich, we'll lose everything. The world is changing. We either help fix it, or we become part of what breaks." The room was silent. Then an older board member nodded. "She's right," he said. "We built this company off her ideas. We should follow her lead again." That day, the company created a new mission statement written by Ellie herself. If it can't help the most forgotten person, it's not worth building. It went viral around the world. Ellie's work caught the attention of leaders, scientists, even world governments. But she never chased fame. She preferred working with her hands. She kept flying to places that needed help, building where others only saw ruins. In one country, she helped convert old trains into moving hospitals. In another, she turned plastic waste into building blocks for homes. People started calling her the engineer of hope. But Ellie never stopped being herself. She still wore the same boots, still carried the same backpack, still wore Jesse's ring. One day, while walking through a dusty camp near a floodplain, she heard a strange sound. A faint, rattling engine. She followed the sound and found an old man working on a broken generator. He looked frustrated, wiping sweat from his brow. "Need a hand?" she asked. The man looked up, confused. You're Ellie Torres, right?" She smiled. "Sometimes. Today I'm just a mechanic." He laughed. Together they fixed the generator. When it sputtered to life, lights turned on in a small tent nearby, a tent that held a tiny newborn baby, sleeping peacefully now under soft light. That moment stayed with Ellie. It reminded her of why she started, not to be famous, not to be remembered, but to fix what was broken, quietly, patiently, with care. Later that year, she returned to her hometown. Her father, now older, and walking with a cane, greeted her at the porch with a warm smile. "You look tired," he said. "I am," she admitted, "but it's a good tired." He handed her something wrapped in cloth. It was Jesse's old toolbox, cleaned, polished. "I think it's time you had the whole thing," he said. Ellie opened it slowly. Inside were tools worn from years of use, and under them, a notebook, Jesse's notebook. She hadn't seen it before. Inside were pages of sketches, ideas, and messages. Some were addressed to her. "One day, you'll go farther than I ever could. You'll fix things I never got the chance to. Keep going." Ellie. She cried that night, not out of sadness but gratitude. She had lived up to his words, and she would keep going. As the sun rose the next morning, Ellie walked outside. She looked at the garage, the street, the trees, all the same, but she was different. Not because of fame, not because of awards, because she never gave up on the most important thing, the power to fix. One person, one engine, one world at a time. And wherever she went next, she knew this: the world wasn't just broken. It was waiting for someone to care, waiting for someone like her. Years later, the world had changed again, and this time Ellie Torres had become a name children learned about in school, not as a billionaire or a celebrity, but as someone who fixed what others left broken. Her inventions powered entire towns. Her ideas had saved thousands of lives. Her foundation had trained over 100,000 young engineers across 20 countries. But Ellie never forgot where it started, not in a university, not in a tech lab, but on a dusty road next to a broken Rolls-Royce, wearing worn boots, with a military ring on her finger and a wrench in her hand. Now she was in her early 40s. She didn't care for the spotlight, even as awards and honors came her way. Nobel Prize. She gave the medal to a village school in Cambodia. United Nations Award. She asked for the prize money to be used for water pumps in dry lands. Magazine covers. She refused most of them, unless they featured her team, not just her. One day, her team told her she was being invited to speak at a global summit in New York. Again, "It'll be streamed worldwide," they said. "Millions will be watching." Ellie smiled politely. "Let someone else speak this time," she replied. "I've said enough. Now it's their turn." Instead, she boarded a train. Destination, a small town few had heard of. There, a quiet mechanics school was opening its doors, funded by her foundation, led by teachers she had trained herself. On opening day, dozens of children sat in rows, hands raised, eyes curious. Ellie walked in wearing the same old boots. No one expected her. No cameras followed her. But one girl, a small one in the back, noticed the ring. She whispered to her friend, "That's her, isn't it?" The girl walked up slowly after class. She was shy, freckles on her cheeks, grease on her palms. "I'm trying to build something," she said, "but I keep getting it wrong." Ellie smiled and knelt down beside her. "Show me." The girl held up a tiny device, a battery-powered light made from scrap parts. It didn't work yet, but the idea was there. The effort, the spark. Ellie turned it over in her hands. "Where'd you get the idea?" The girl shrugged. "I don't know. I just thought it might help my grandma. Her house gets dark when the power goes out." Ellie nodded. "That's how it starts," she said. "Not with big plans, just with someone you care about and the will to try." She took the girl's hands gently. "Let me show you something." Together they opened the device, rewired the switch, adjusted the copper wires, and finally the light turned on. The girl gasped. Her smile was bright as the bulb itself. "You did it," she whispered. Ellie shook her head. "We did it." That evening, Ellie sat on the steps of the workshop, watching the sunset. Next to her sat the little girl, still holding the tiny light in her hands. "I want to be like you someday," she said. Ellie chuckled. "No," she replied. "Be better, be braver, build things I couldn't imagine." The girl asked, "Were you scared when you started?" Ellie looked at the fading sky. "Terrified," she said, "but I had a promise to keep. My brother Jesse, he always believed in me, even when I didn't." She touched the ring. "Every time I was afraid, I remembered him, and then I kept going." The girl sat quietly, then reached into her pocket. "This is for you," she said, handing Ellie a small folded drawing. It was a picture of Ellie standing in a garage, tools in hand, helping kids fix machines. At the top, written in shaky handwriting, it said, "Miss Ellie, fixer of everything." Ellie's eyes filled with tears, not because it was perfect, but because it was true, not in a grand way, but in the simple, quiet way that truly matters. She hugged the girl. "Thank you," she whispered. The next morning, Ellie got a call. A satellite built with her new self-healing metal had just survived a solar storm, something no other material had done before. Scientists were cheering. One of them said, "Without Ellie's tech, we would have lost contact. She just helped save the global weather network." Another headline followed, "Ellie Torres Tech saves Earth monitoring grid." But Ellie, she was busy in a small garage, helping another child fix a broken fan. That was her way. Fix what matters. Teach others to fix too. Let the world write stories. She was too busy building them. 20 years later. A grand building stood in the heart of a city. Over its doors, carved in strong silver letters, were the words, "The Ellie Torres Institute for Practical Invention." Inside, classrooms buzzed with young minds. Workshops rang with the sound of gears and hammers. On the far wall, a mural stretched across 50 feet. It showed Ellie standing beside children, beside Jesse, beside Michael Rhodes, and in the background, machines of every kind. At the bottom of the mural was her most famous quote, "Fix what you can, teach others what you know, and never walk away from something just because it's broken." Visitors came from around the world, but Ellie, she didn't live in that city. She had retired to the quiet hills where her old home still stood. Her father's tools still hung in the garage. And sometimes, when the wind was soft, she could almost hear Jesse's laugh. She spent her days in peace, walking, sketching, sometimes still tinkering with ideas. And on special days, she opened letters from kids she had never met, thanking her for the future they now believed in. One letter ended like this: "You never met me, but because of you I'm building a wind-powered water system for my town. I never thought I'd matter, but your story made me try." Ellie smiled. That night she stepped outside, looked at the stars and whispered, "Keep building." Then she went back inside and started sketching again, because some people never stop, not because they must, but because it's who they are. The end